So, for all of you who don't recognize me, my name is Cachette Roman. I'm one of the reference librarians, and I'm the head of adult programming at the Irvington Public Library in Irvington, New York. With us today is Oscar Israelowitz, who's going to be talking about the secrets of the New York City subways. I'm going to shut off my audio and video in just a moment. Just a reminder, again, as this is a webinar format, all audience members are automatically muted. During the Q&A later in the presentation, you'll be given the option to request that you be unmuted, but until that point, we won't be able to hear anything you have to say, so please remember to use the chat and the Q&A feature if you have any questions or comments. And with that, I am off and keeping an eye on things. Oscar?
Okay, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Today's program is called The Secrets of the New York City Subways, and my name is Oscar Israelowitz. I started this project when I was in Cooper Union as an architecture student, and I suggested to my teacher, let's do an exhibit on, or photo project, of photographing some of the glorious mosaics of the New York City subways. And my teacher, David Upert, who worked for the Whitney Museum of American Art, said it was a great idea. So we went out and we went underground in the middle of the night sometimes and photographed some of these mosaics, which we're going to see this evening. So that's the background as how I got into this, although I've been riding the subways since I was in high school. That's way back. In the 1970s, 60s, and 70s. And I played a lot of hooky and went riding on the subways and just went on and on and on. Went to Broadway Junction in Brownsville, East New York. And I was mesmerized by some of the architecture, engineering, and the artwork all combined in one. So today's program is about the history and the artwork of the subways of New York. Some of which you've seen, some of which you have never seen before. It all started in March 11th, 1888, when New York City witnessed one of its major snowstorms or blizzards in its history. There were over 55 inches of snow falling over 2.5 days. It almost sounds like this year's snowstorm, where it crippled the city for maybe a week or so. So what happened was that even the East River froze over, and there were ice jams, and people walked from Brooklyn Heights, stockbrokers walked to work over the East River on the ice. And there's some very interesting renderings of that, where these stockbrokers with their top hats are stranded because the ice jams started breaking up and they couldn't go anywhere. So they were rescued by these ships in the harbor. Anyway, it was decided then in 1888 that New York City really needs to have an underground subway system. And before that, there were elevated lines all over Manhattan and Brooklyn and the Bronx, including the 2nd Avenue, 3rd Avenue, 6th Avenue, and 9th Avenue L's in Manhattan. And when this blizzard came, everything was frozen and nobody moved anywhere. And all the trolleys on the streets, nothing happened. So they said, we have to build a subway system. So the first subway was started in 1900. It was built by the IRT, Interborough Rapid Transit Company, and it ran for 9.1 miles from City Hall Station downtown. It went along Lafayette Street, Park Avenue South, and at 42nd Street, it would go west all the way to Broadway, continue up Broadway to 145th Street. That was phase one. Later on, the Broadway line extended all the way to 241st Street or so in Riverdale. And there was another spur that went through Harlem underground and then went up to the Bronx Park. It was extended southward to Brooklyn in 1908. But the first subway system, let's go and see the first slide of this program. We're at the City Hall station, was opened October 27, 1904. Designed by Hines and Lafarge architects. The style of architecture was, well, basically the arches were filled in with Guastavino tiles. There were beautiful chandeliers. There were stained glass skylights. It was gorgeous. It was closed down in the early 1940s because not enough people used the station, and it was on a very sharp curve. And here's another slide of the station. This was where you got your ticket upstairs, and you came down, you descended down a set of stairs. And the ticket booth was basically up there. But to get people to go underground was a hard task. You had to beautify the system. You had to bring in artwork. You had to make it really gorgeous because you're going underground and you've got tens of thousands of rats down there. So you had to make it beautiful. So we're going to see some of these beautification elements which enhance the subway system. So they had skylights. They would have like glass globes, which would bring in natural light in some of the stations. You had beautiful mosaic tiles, such as this one at the South Ferry Station, which was opened a year after the first northbound station, which is south of the City Hall Station. And it basically shows a sloop in the harbor. These were designed by Hines and Lafarge. Now, one of the prominent people in charge of the artwork was August Belmont. And he was a banker, a very wealthy man. He owned the Belmont Hotel at 42nd Street near Times Square. And he had his own private subway car called the Mineola. It was an enhanced, well, it was just leather seats and just gorgeous stuff in there. I think they actually have a sample of it, so they saved it somehow, somewhere. It is around. But so he would take his own private car, other than not taking the subway system, he'd take this private car from the basement of the Belmont Hotel. He would take it down along 42nd Street, swing down to Park Avenue South, Lafayette Street, past City Hall, go to Brooklyn, to what is, well, at one point was called Atlantic, the Atlantic Avenue, which is today Barclays Center. And at that point, that's where you have the Long Island Railroad Terminal. And they would have the same level, well, the tracks would be on the same exact level as the IRT and the Long Island Railroad. And you could just switch. So he took his private car from the IRT trains, the subway system, and switched onto the Long Island Railroad. He went to Jamaica, the main terminal there, and it transferred out and went all the way down to Belmont Race Track, which he built. So it was all one person, August Belmont. Yeah, cool guy. So he wanted to make the subway look beautiful. So he hired the best people, the best architects, best engineers, and it took 4 years to build the first system, 9 miles. It's tremendous. Here, we're looking at the Wall Street ticket booth. So you would buy your ticket at this restored, they've saved all well, it's the artwork actually of the first ticket booth, one of the early ticket booths. It would cost a nickel, and you would get a ticket, and you would turn around and go to another conductor, if you will, and he would take your ticket and he would slip it into this box. And you see on the right side in the middle area, there will be a like a switch thing, and would just clunk it down. He would chop the ticket. And this was known as a ticket chopper. This was at the Wall Street station up until about 5 years ago. It's been removed. I look for it every time I pass by the station. I don't know where it went. May have gone to the Transit Museum. I would imagine it's in the Transit Museum, but it's no longer on display. I guess people started to exploit the chopper and started chopping everything in their sight. We're now at the Fulton Street station. This is at the mezzanine level near the 2 and 3 train entrance. Terracotta panel was taken. There were about 25 of these beautiful terracotta panels depicting scenes of the city, going back to, here we see a view of New Amsterdam. And you see on the left side, well, you see there's a clipper ship on the left side, and behind it looks like a little tower. That's a windmill because it was Dutch. And then on the right side, there's another clipper ship. And in between the two, there's a man waving on top of a stockade. And if you look down below that, you see some people standing on the grass, and you'll look to the right of that, you'll see two people hanging. Yes, they used to hang people in New Amsterdam. We're now at the 33rd Street station. This is a terracotta American bald eagle designed by Heinz and Lafarge. Rumor has it that they put these American eagles wherever there was some kind of federal establishment, like an armory. So at 33rd Street, there used to be an armory. At 14th Street, there are a couple of eagles. At the Brooklyn Bridge, B to B, they would have, instead of numbers, they would have letters back to back, B to B. And so this is just symbolic of the federal establishments along the route. We're now looking at the 72nd Street Mosaic panel. When I started this project for the Whitney Museum, well, for Cooper Union, and then it went on to an exhibit at the Whitney Museum, and then it went to the Brooklyn Museum, so it was a traveling exhibit. I noticed that the name entablatures were designed almost like a Persian rug style. And you would have the name running horizontal, and you would have this kind of very beautiful, delicate, intricate details of mosaic tiles. And they're still in most of the stations. So actually, when you follow the early stations from Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn all the way through the very first lines, you go to not Grand Central Station, because that was an extension going north, but rather you go from 33rd Street and then swing over to what was 42nd Street, and then up 7th Avenue and Broadway. Along the Broadway line, you would have the original mosaic panels. And what's interesting is that these mosaics, the section of the early designs from 1904, when you had a local station, it was only about 75 feet wide because there were only 3 or 4 cars maximum. When you had, excuse me, an express stop, you would have many more trains. You would have maybe 8 or 10 cars. We're now at 103rd Street on the original line. This is a decal designed in the Beaux-Arts motif. A lot of them have been restored over recent years. You'll also notice on the top section, the 2 little leaves with dark backgrounds. Those are the air vents. So aside from the globes, the glass globes that would bring in light, you would have air shafts behind the mosaic tiles to bring in fresh air. Something fascinating. When you get to 125th Street, you have this glorious viaduct, an arch, which has become a National Historic Landmark. Now, what happened was, when you have 125th Street is a geologic fault. So 125th Street bottomed out, dropped down. You have 116th Street is higher up. 137th Street station is also higher up. And in between these 2 stations, you have this drop of about 70 feet or so, or maybe longer, rather higher. So what you had, the trains went on a horizontal plane as much as possible, but the earth below, the geology, the geography dropped down. So you had to create this arch, very elegant arch, and it's still there. So actually, you see in the background, that's Columbia University, and Fairway is just to the left. Actually, you can see the arch of the, there's another viaduct near the, you have 3 lights on the lower, well, on the left side, and just beyond that, you see some other arches from another bridge. That's the Henry Hudson Parkway. So that's where we are at this location. We're now at 231st Street Station on the number 1 train in the Bronx, like going towards Riverdale. In that, it's called Magic Realism in the Kingsbridge section near Riverdale, and it was designed by Philippe Galindo. What it is basically is a fantasy. You have on the right side, on the upper, you have this horse and carriage, but it's not a regular horse. It's the chevron, I think. It's like a flying horse. And then you've got this train, this pink train, kind of cool, and an arch bridge. There are no arch bridges like that on the subway system that are so small arches. And then you have on the left side something, a fantasy. You have these skyscrapers, but you go down from the skyscraper images and you have, it becomes the shell of turtles. So I guess the guy must have been on some kind of hallucinatory drugs or something or other. So this is a beautiful fantasy in the subway system. Who knew? So we saw the early designs, and then we have more contemporary designs. These were done in the 1980s, 1990s, early 2000s. So you had an enhancement of the subway system over the centuries, actually. Trade, Travel, and Treasure is designed in glazed terracotta, designed by Margie Utgo, rather, in 1997. Now, this station, Cortlandt Street Station, on the R train, is this section of design is underground below the train level. So you have to go under the trains to get to the other side, and also to get out of the station at one point. When the World Trade Center, when the Twin Towers caved in 2001, 9/11, this station was closed down because the steel members of the World Trade Centers came right through the station. Luckily, they evacuated the station just before the collapse, and but the artist was afraid that all of this work was lost. And when she came back, it took 2 years for them to restore the station, maybe longer, 2 to 3 years. And they just opened up like a year or two ago. And it's glorious. It's basically, it's world trade, as in World Trade Center. So you see all these different clipper ships in glazed tile. It's just beautifully, this is like a work in a museum. It's like in a gallery, but who knew this was in the New York City subway system? But it's there, it's underground somewhere. Then you go to 42nd Street on the AC and E trains. You have glass mosaic tiles. Losing My Marbles by Lisa Dinhofer was created in 2003. This is also in the mezzanine level. We spoke a little bit about the elevated trains before they built the subways in 2000, and what's it, in 1904, October 27. So before that, they had the elevator lines. So you had the 2nd, 3rd, 6th, and 9th Avenue L. So here we're looking at the 2nd Avenue L. You'll notice it's only 3 cars long. So again, this must have been a local train. And you see, this is a low V, that's a low voltage train, and it's coming from Queens. That's Queensborough Bridge in the background, and we're in Manhattan here, and the train is basically coming onto the downtown track. There were 2 levels at 59th Street or so, 57th Street. So the downtown train, which we're looking at, is basically heading to the right side of this image. Below that, you see the tracks go, that's the uptown and Queens bound train. These are all gone. But what's interesting, if you take the cable car from Roosevelt Island to Manhattan, you'll still see the remnant of that 2nd Avenue L. It's still there. It's a cutoff. You see those, they're basically those 2 double lines in the center with the zigzags going horizontally. So on the right side, that would be the Manhattan bound, that would be raising up towards the end, that would be on the upper level, and on the left side would be the Queens bound tracks. We're now underneath the municipal building in Lower Manhattan on Center Street. And again, we saw the Guastavino tiles at the City Hall station. Guastavino brothers also designed the Great Hall on Ellis Island. He also designed the Oyster Bar in the Grand Central Terminal. But this was the entrance, the subway entrance, and you'll notice that the view is really a Roman U. It's a V. I don't know how you say it Swedish. It's what's a subway entrance. But what's fascinating also is if you've ever been at the Chambers Street station on the J and Z train, right, at Chambers Street, it's kind of really run down. It's always been, smells like urine. It's a really, really sad state. But the columns of the municipal building go directly down into the station. So they built the station in 1913 and the municipal building at the very same time. So it's a part and parcel of the same concept. So they built the building with the intention of building the subway lines going right through the columns. Fun station. 14th Street station, 14th Street, the A, C, and E, and the L trains on the lower levels. You'll notice these interesting metallic little people. Now, Tom Otterness had a commission in 2000 with the MTA to design maybe 10 or 15 little people, or little things. And it was called Life Underground. And it was built in, designed in 2000. And he went wild with these. He started with 10, 15, and he went to maybe 100 of them. And he had like the uptown and the downtown on the AC and E trains. And then down below, you have the L trains. But in between on the staircases, there were all kinds of little creatures around. It's phenomenal. But he had fun and he had a great time. And here we see, alligators in the sewer on the station on the AC&E train. There's a story of when you were a kid in school, you would get a little baby alligator somehow. I don't know how you got it. And then you brought it home to your mother, said, this is my new pet. And the mother was panic stricken. So she threw the little baby alligator into the toilet. And this being New York City, the legend has it that all of these alligators grew and became monster alligators in the New York City sewer system. And here we see Tom Otterness bringing these alligators with human hands, mind you, out from the sewers and biting one of the little creatures. So he had fun. He really enjoyed what he was doing with this project. And then you get, of course, Fafum, I just missed my train. Whoa, heads up. That's a bad one. We're now in the Bronx at the original Mott Avenue station. The mosaics for the Mott Avenue station are covered with a wooden sign. It's really now called the 149th Street Grand Concourse Station. What's interesting, I mentioned earlier that the mosaics from all of the stations in 1904 were modeled after a prototype. So it would be like a Persian rug design. This is off the beaten track. This has nothing to do with anything, and it's a unique design. It's, I don't know what kind of style you call it, but it don't match nothing, as they say, but it's there. We're now in the Bronx on the number 4 Jerome Avenue line at the new Yankee Stadium between 161st and 167th Street stations. Now you'll notice the train on top, the train tracks are much higher than the lower spur. Okay, it's maybe 4 stories up at least at that location. We're talking about the new Yankee Stadium. The original Yankee Stadium was a little bit further south, a few hundred feet south. They demolished it and then they built the new one. Now the spur, this bridge, it's basically bridge architecture or engineering. So the spur would swing off. We're talking upstairs you have on the left side would be going downtown, on the right side the tracks would be going uptown, and the spurs would also have 2 tracks, and they would be linking from the Jerome Avenue or at River Avenue the number 4 train. They would link into the 9th Avenue elevated lines. It would cross the Harlem River, and there would be, by the old polo grounds, there would be a big train yard, and then they would continue down all the way down to South Ferry. So this is the leftover, the remnants of the old 9th Avenue L, the spur. We're now at 161st Street, Yankee Stadium on the, this is the, I think the D train in the Bronx. and it's a glass mosaic by Vito and Conci and Helene Brandt. It kind of looks kind of funky because it's not straight-laced, it's kind of off-balance. Look below, you see the 161st Street station, but it looks like an earthquake hit it, and it's going up and down and jarring, and it's just fun. And even on top, you see, look down below, it says 160, and on the top, it says on the wall, First Street. So it's like, just like we saw earlier on 125th Street with the big arch on the #1 train. So we had a little bit of replication of that kind of freaked out stuff that artists do. It's fun. We're now at 180th Street on the #2 and 5 trains. This building was at one point the administrative offices for the New York, Westchester, and Boston Railway, which later became the station for the Dyer Avenue line, the #5 train in the Bronx. And the building itself is a National Historic Landmark, but the tiles inside are glorious. Bouquets of flowers with a turtle on the base and eggs. Like, why? It's just fun. We're now at Burke Avenue on the #2 train in the Bronx. The station basically is called Bronx, or the artwork is called Bronx Literature by Beatrice Caron. Stained glass windows reflect Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. Edgar Allan Poe had a house north of Fordham Road, a little wood frame house. He had houses all over the place. I guess he slept everywhere like George Washington. But you'll notice on each of these window panels, the little black ravens flying around and books open and flying. The next one, still at Burke Avenue, is kind of interesting. Here we have a Star of David. That's a synagogue. And what's this all about? This is Anatevka from Shalom Aleicham's story, The Adventures of Muttle, which became Fiddler on the Roof, If I Were a Rich Man, and all that stuff. Shalom Aleichem was known as the Jewish Mark Twain, and lived in the Bronx at 968 Kelly Street near the Intervale Avenue station. So here's a little bit of Jewishness in the subway system. And it says, there's a little book that someone says, Shalom Aleichem, Adventures of Muttle. On the last stop of the #2 train at 241st Street in the Wakefield section, there's a portrayal in stained glass of permanent residents and visitors by Alfredo Seibel. It was done in 2006. It's just glorious stuff. I mean, who knew this kind of artwork existed in the subway system? It's just, it doesn't end. We got a lot more. We're now at the Pelham Parkway station of the #2 train, and we see some stained glass windows back to the garden by Tomei Arai, done in 2006. You'll notice on the right side below the flowers, beautiful flowers, there's an insert of an old black and white photograph of Old White Plains Road. Now we're in Queens, and we're looking at the Queensborough Bridge going westbound towards Manhattan. You see the top above the steel track, the frame of the station. You see the top of the Queensborough Bridge. That used to be, what we're looking at here at this point is half of the station is in existence. So you have a central platform with 2 tracks, and you have 2 levels of that today in Queensborough Plaza. At one point, it wasn't like that. It was double the width. They would have 2 sets of tracks on 2 levels. So you would have the 7 train, today's 7 train, and you have the BMT going to Astoria. You would have the 2nd Avenue L. Also, you would have the 60th Street Tunnel. So you had all of this stuff happening, and this was all taken away. Half the station was removed. So you see here, we're looking at the other half of the station, that the framework, that if they would take that down, the whole building would collapse. So they saved part of that station, just a remnant, a fragment. Fulton Street elevated line in Brooklyn near, well, the station is just south of, well, Atlantic Avenue Station at East New York, Broadway Junction. And this was one of the stations where I grew up and just can never figure out what's going on. Up until before, when I did this book, I actually found out where these cutoff tracks ended up. So we're looking at the cutoff at Pitkin Avenue. So this was the elevated, the Fulton Street elevated line would go along Fulton Street as an L above the street, and then would swing through the Broadway Junction southward, and then swing east along Pitkin Avenue, and then ultimately Liberty Avenue, and then hook up with what is now the A train, the elevated A train. Nowadays, all of this elevated stuff has been cut off, chopped off. So on the left side of this is Van Sicklen Street, going north-south. So on the left side of Van Sicklen Street, you would have Brownsville. On the right side, you would have East New York. So the Fulton Street L was demolished in the 1940s and was replaced with today's A train. Now we're going to see a whole bunch of things. So actually, we're standing on Sutter Avenue Station looking north on the L train. That's this picture. Now, where this went, going east along Pitkin Avenue and then Liberty Avenue, this was the other end connecting that original Fulton Street L. It's cut off because the A train now goes on the left side, swings down and goes underground. So we're looking at the 1915, this is at the 80th Street, Hudson Street station in Woodhaven, Queens. The 1915 BRT Brooklyn Rapid Transit train, Fulton Street L, meets the A train. This is the junction of these two elements. So on the left side, you have the A train going underground. It starts off at an L, which it continued, was originally on the right side, and then they decided, let's make it underground. And so you see the left side of the tracks go down underground, and the right side was the original Fulton Street L, which linked up with that, going back one to this on Pitkin Avenue and Van Sicklen by East New York. So let's continue. Now, going eastward, still on the A train, on the original A train, Fulton Street elevated, there would be 3 tracks, and it would go over the old Long Island Railroad at the Rockaway Beach branch. So we're now at 99th Street and Leopards Boulevard. Okay, the street level is Leopards Boulevard. First level of tracks going north-south with the concrete walls, I guess, and steel girders over the street was the old Long Island Railroad Rockaway Beach branch, which was terminated 1955 or so. There was a big fire on the tracks in the water, and they sold the A train tracks to the the Long Island Railroad tracks, rather, to the A train, to the New York City Transit Authority. And now this section, going from north of Broad Channel all the way up into Queens, going northward, is abandoned. And there are all kinds of plans as to what to do with this. Some people say we should turn it into the Queens edition of the High Line, and you take an old abandoned railroad track and turn it into a walkway, a beautiful park, a linear park, and you can have people walking, you can have people biking, and just turn it into a people place. Others say, let's turn it back into a train system, because now all the trains are part of the MTA, Metropolitan Transit Authority. So it's a federal organization. So let's, part and parcel of the same corporation. So let's do that. So there's all kinds of things. And in the meantime, nothing is happening. Going southward along this Rockaway Beach branch, which was originally the Long Island Railroad, we're going south along what today is the A train. There are 3 A trains. There's one A train that goes east-west along Leopards Boulevard, and there's another one that spurs down, that goes down to Far Rockaway, and yet another one that swings towards Rockaway Park. So you have 3 different A trains, and there's a shuttle also, the S train. And Gateway National Park is on the left side of this image. Jamaica Bay is just beyond, and Kennedy Airport is also on the left side. But look at these beautiful little houses It almost looks like a fishing village with waterways and channels. It's just beautiful, very serene. And then we get to the Rockaway. In Rockaway Beach, we have Beach 67th Street, Auburn by the Sea. That's the neighborhood. We have stained glass windows called Beaches of New York City by Simon Levinson. Some of the styles represent works by Grandma Moses. Kind of fun. Still in Rockaway's Beach 98th Street station. It's called Be Good or Be Gone by Duke Riley. Portrays a fishing village of bygone years. And you notice the houses are built on stilts in the water in Jamaica Bay or Rockaway Beach, whichever. We're still at Beach 98th Street, same design. And yeah, but different views. They have seagulls and flags flying, just nice. At Beach 105th Street, the neighborhood's called Seaside, we have a work called Vast by Kelly Hirsch. It portrays a jellyfish. On the right side, you have the head of the jellyfish, and you have the tentacles going to the left side. And then something really weird is in Woodhaven Boulevard station on the JZ train in Queens, you have 5 points of observation by Kathleen McCarthy. It's a mask. And it's part of the windscreen of the station, but you can actually look out and look down at the street through that. It's really haunting. And it's big. It's like maybe 10 feet high and about 4 feet out. We're now in Brooklyn. Yay, Brooklyn, at the Borough Hall station. This was the first subway station in Brooklyn, built in 1908 by Hines and Lafarge. And the architecture, the design patterns, the originals are like a 3-dimensional B&H or H&B, whichever Borough Hall, and beautiful wreath and mosaic tiles all around. And here we see the head house, which was the ticket booth for the Atlantic Avenue station. So this is where you would have a building. And there were 3 or 4 of these. You have one at Battery Park, you have one at 72nd Street, and there used to be one at 116th Street by Columbia University, and this one at Atlantic Avenue. So there were 4 of these buildings, and beautiful design with terracotta and limestone. This was restored recently when they fixed up Barclays Center at Atlantic Avenue Station. And it was moved around several times until they fixed everything up. And now the interior is a work of art. You have to see it for yourself. It's like a set of negative staircases inside. Interesting map, 1924 edition of the Brooklyn Manhattan BMT trains. I just want to point out, you see which says BMT in the lower left-hand corner. Go up above, actually the M, as in BMT, go up a couple of inches and you see it says Brooklyn Bridge. Okay, so, and the red indicates that it was above ground. So all of the red elements in this map are elevated trains. So you had a train station at Park Row, right opposite the Brooklyn, the City Hall. And you would have the 2nd Avenue L, 2nd Avenue and 3rd Avenue L coming down from the north and stopping. We're going to see a picture of what it really looked like before. So anyway, so this Brooklyn Bridge train, let's say we're going to Fulton Street. So it's kind of hard, if I don't have a pointer, it's hard to find where we're going. So if you follow the Brooklyn Bridge train, you take it down a notch and you see, swing it over to the right, horizontally, you see Fulton Street, okay? And then when you get to Fulton Street, there's a spur and it turns south to the bottom. And then you see it says Grand Avenue and then Dean Street. So that was the today's Franklin Avenue shuttle. All right, so basically, so it started off at the Brooklyn Bridge station, went over the Brooklyn Bridge, past Sand Street, which was a major hub of a whole bunch of elevated lines, and then went along Fulton Street, elevated Fulton Street, went over to the Franklin Avenue shuttle, and hooked up with today's Brighton Beach line at Prospect Park. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the Malbone Street station and what happened there. Okay, here, let's go back a little bit. We mentioned the Brooklyn Bridge shed. This was the terminal. The building on the left was the, well, the terminus of the BRT, Brooklyn Rapid Transit. And that's going horizontal. You can see the trains in the middle, the low V's. They had trolley electrical lines. It was a cable car originally in 1883. So it was just fascinating. And it would stop before Brooklyn Bridge is the City Hall, Manhattan City Hall is on the right side. All right, Park Row is just there. That tall building in the background with the arches is the site of today's Pace University or Pace College. The trestle in the foreground, going to the left with all the people with the beautiful turn of the century attire with the the straw hats and the long dresses. That was the 2nd and 3rd Avenue L terminus at City Hall. And so you can get off here and go downstairs to City Hall. This was around 1900, so it may have been before they built the first subway line in 1904. But you can also transfer to the BRT, Brooklyn Rapid Transit, and go over to Brooklyn. So it's a whole hub. Now, let's continue. We're looking now at the Franklin Avenue Shuttle. Okay, at Eastern Parkway, that arch bridge, tunnel rather, on top is Eastern Parkway, which was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, okay, who designed Central Park, Prospect Park, Ocean Parkway, and Eastern Parkway. Now, I want to read you an account of this train, which we're looking at here, is going southbound, going towards Brighton Beach. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Malbone Street crash. And I'm going to read to you a little bit from my book. And it says here, on November 1st, 1918, the motormen of the Brooklyn Rapid Transit, BRT, were on strike. An influenza epidemic was hitting the region and a major train disaster was about to happen. Edward Luciano was a 23-year-old train dispatcher on the Culver line. He had just lost his daughter in the influenza epidemic and had suffered a bout of the flu himself. He was given a one-day training session in how to be a motorman and was instructed to operate the Brighton train from Manhattan City Hall to Brooklyn. Nearly to the point of exhaustion, he was forced to work a double shift. He manned his train at the Park Row Terminal in Manhattan, crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, and continued along the Fulton Street L. At Franklin Avenue, he accepted the wrong route and had to back up his train and then turn onto the Franklin Avenue line. Before coming to the Prospect Park station, there was a hairpin S-curve at this Malbone Street tunnel and instructions not to exceed a speed limit of 6 miles per hour. He was not familiar with the sharp curve and took it at over 30 miles an hour. The train's first wooden car hung precariously to the track, then derailed upon entering the tunnel. The second car slammed violently into a concrete abutment, losing its roof and one of its sides in the impact. The third car disintegrated into a tangled mass of wood and glass. A total of 97 people died in the Malbone Street tunnel disaster. The motorman somehow did survive. The dead and injured were taken to nearby Ebbets Field. The BRT went bankrupt and was reorganized as the BMT in 1923. A law banning the use of wood-frame passenger cars in all underground rail lines in New York City was introduced. Malbone Street was renamed Empire Boulevard after this tragedy. However, there is still a small segment of Malbone Street west of New York Avenue near the police station. The actual Malbone Street disaster took place in the tunnel just behind the southbound layoff track of the Franklin Shuttle in Prospect Park Station. So this picture, which we see here now, is a similar train wood frame heading south. This could have been the one that crashed. And the next station would be, well, this is the tunnel as it appears today. And the next station is the Prospect Park station looking north in the site of the Malbone Street disaster of November 1st, 1918. Now, these two cars, it says S, that's part of the shuttle, is in the southbound direction. And if you go north, if you're looking north in that little tunnel, that's where the Malbone Street disaster took place. So it's all still there. We're now at the Avenue H station. It opened in 1905 as a real estate office in the Fisk Terrace section. It was later converted into a railroad ticket office. And we're going to see some of the artwork on the outside, some rocking chairs, but they're metal rocking chairs and they don't shake, they don't, rock. It's called Brooklyn Bucolic, and it was designed by Edward Coppell in 2012. And on the right side, you see there's some tree stumps as part of the supporting the roof of the station. The Gravesend Neck Road station on the B and Q, well, it's on the Q train, the local, was designed for the Long Island Railroad Manhattan Beach Division. And we see here on the right side of the station, there is an extraneous concrete set of stairs going up to a double set of tracks. This is on the east side of the station. There are still 4 tracks. You have the middle tracks of the B train, on the outer tracks of the Q train. And the 2 tracks were a spur that went to the Sheepshead Bay Race Track, or part of it. And here we see a map from 1924, an area map of Brooklyn. We're talking about Bedford Avenue and Avenue X, as in XYZ. And you'll notice on the right side in the middle, you have, at an off angle, you have an elliptical shape. That was the racetrack. And you see the beginnings of the street grid is like overlaying the old racetrack. We're now looking at an aerial view, 1924 view of Greenwood Cemetery. That's on the right. And the 5th Avenue and 3rd Avenue L's and the West End interlocking hub. It's hard to explain this, but let me go to another. Well, actually, you'll see here, there's a street coming at an angle, right? You see the park on the right side, the Greenwood Cemetery. And then you have along, that's the very first street, you have the 5th Avenue L. And then it would turn, after the cemetery ended, you would go, there'd be a train yard, and then it would turn right, and it would go and would turn left. We're talking like the upper left-hand corner now, and that became the 3rd Avenue L. And then you had the other spur going to, when you came 5th Avenue down, turn to the right, it would go over the 9th Avenue hub. What does that mean? Whoa. That's what it means. We're looking at 3rd Avenue in the background. In the upper part, you see Bush Terminal, those big white buildings, those industrial buildings. You have the Gowanus, I guess the, well, it's the Brooklyn Queens Expressway. It's part of the BQE before it becomes the Belt. But what you have also on the right side is Greenwood Cemetery. This is an actual photograph, and the street on where those big white houses are becomes like hard to tell. If I don't have a pointer, it's hard to pinpoint. So you have this zigzag formation of a street. You have 5th Avenue, and then you have this big white flat building. That's the repair shop, and then you have the street coming down and making like an L shape, kind of an S shape rather, and coming all the way down. That's 36th and 37th Streets. And then on the bottom of this picture, in the center, you have the 9th Avenue station. So that's 9th Avenue all the way in the bottom. And in the middle, smack dab in the middle, you have the West End train. So the 5th Avenue L turned through this storage yard, and then it came down, and there were ramps. Let's go to the next shot. Here we go. Here are the ramps coming down. So that would be the 5th Avenue L rather, coming down. And at that point, when it came down to the first level, the middle level, If it went straight down, it became the West End line, today's D train, as in David. If you went to the second, third, and fifth tracks, they go down below. There was a secondary level at 9th Avenue that became the Culver line, or today's, it merged with the F train. I know it's complicated. You have to read the book. Anyway, this is now on the D train, Fort Hamilton Parkway Station, and we're looking at beautiful flowers designed by Portia Munson. And if you go to the station on street level on Fort Hamilton Parkway, and you look up, you see Guastavino tiles as part of the cantilever floor of the station. We're now looking at the Art Deco trestle above the 4th Avenue station on the F and G trains, built in 1933, 1932, 1933. Beautiful Art Deco style, gorgeous. The F train and all the lettered trains were part of the independent system. So we had the IRT, Interborough Rapid Transit, you had the BMT, BRT, BMT, Brooklyn Manhattan Transit, and then you had the independent IND lines, all of the lettered trains. So you have the A through G. Used to be H also at one point. We're now at the Sutter Avenue station along the L train. We're looking at Habitat for the Yellowbird, excuse me, by Tamayo Noda in 1907. It's located in actually Brownsville, East New York. It's one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the city. I know I'm going to hear a lot of flack because people live there and say nothing really happens there. But this station, there is no graffiti. I was so shocked in a really bad neighborhood not to have not one drop of graffiti on this beautiful artwork. It's a miracle. We're now at the Grand Army Plaza station on the number 2 and 3 trains. A work by Jane Greengold, Wings for the IRT, The Irresistible Romance of Travel, done in 1995. Now this logo, if you look at, there was an old book put out by Arnold Press in 1904 describing the construction of the first IRT. And that logo has the trains with those little lanterns on top and the central light fixture. So it was like a low V. So this is a more updated version of that logo. The Eastern Parkway station at Brooklyn Museum. This is part of the Bruegel series installed in 1994 by Pat Steyer. Now, the Brooklyn Museum has, if you go to the backyard, if you're ever there, they have some really beautiful architectural relics. They actually have a replica of the Statue of Liberty in green, in copper. So part of the salvaged artworks from buildings from all over the city are installed in this subway station. So very beautiful, elegant details. We're finishing up. We'll be done in like a couple of minutes. The 36th Street station on the D, N, and R trains contains some glass mosaics. The work is called An Underground Movement, Designers, Builders, Writers, designed by Owen Smith. His works are reminiscent of the WPA artists Diego Rivera and Ben Shahn. Notice the hands, they're very large on hands, very big, prominent hands. Beautiful. And then there's another building, or rather another at the mezzanine level also, at the 86th Street station. This work contains mosaics called Heydays, designed by Amy Bennett in 2011. It's a portrayal of beautiful Victorian homes, and there's a widow's walk on the roof, and somebody's looking out at the harbor, looking for somebody to come back from the sea voyages. And our last picture shows the Tottenville station. You can't leave out Staten Island. It's part of New York City. Well, some people say it is because, well, at one point it was part of New Jersey, but that's another story altogether. This was part of the originally called the Staten Island Rapid Transit. They shortened it to Staten Island Railway. This line was built in 1860 by Cornelius Vanderbilt, who owned the B&O Railroad, the Baltimore and Ohio, used the engines and passenger and freight cars on Staten Island. Actually, he's buried in Staten Island. He had a home there. And this train goes all the way down to Tottenville, which is like a fishing village. It's almost like Cape May. Some beautiful Victorian homes. There are a lot of sea captains' homes there that are historic landmarks. Across the waterway, that's Perth Amboy, New Jersey. So, so this is the southernmost town in all of New York State, New York City and New York State. So this is the program. I hope you liked it. You enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun talking about it. I left out a lot of stuff, I know, but there's so much, you know, I can spend hours and days and months and years going through all of the artwork and the subway stations. So thank you very much for having me, and I'll try to answer some of the questions that you have. Hello.
Very sorry, it just took me a second to unmute.
Okay.
Okay, we have a comment. Loved it, so informative. Thank you so much. And let's see. We had a comment earlier noting that there were Guastavino tiled ceilings at Grand Central Terminal near the Oyster Bar.
Right.
We have a comment from Brenda saying, thank you for your presentation, from a Brooklyn girl.
Yay, Brooklyn.
And if anyone wants to go on voice chat, just let us know in the text chat or click the raise hand button, and I'll click the button to allow you to talk. Just give a minute or two. Okay, I see. Go ahead, Bijan.
There are about 4 or 5 panels of a female figure tiled. They're very large. They must be about 8-9 feet near Columbus Circle. I'm not quite sure the exact location, but if you're seated in a train and you pass those panels, it looks like it's an animated figure. Do you know anything about that?
There is an animated figure after the north of the DeKalb Avenue station in Brooklyn.
Pardon me.
There are mosaic tiles at the 66th Street station at the Lincoln Center. So they depict opera singers, ballerinas, and opera stars, and singers have with gold mosaic tiles, very elegant. Is that it? I don't know.
Yeah, that might be it. I'll Google.
Okay.
Thanks.
Right, it's at 59th Street, no, 66th, about 66th Street station on the #1 train.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Let's see if we have any other questions or comments. Just allow another minute or two for that to go through. And I wanted to mention a couple things that I found out. I looked up that statue of the alligator coming out of the sewer because I was curious about the shape of the figure that he was dragging down. And if you look at other views of it, or if you go and see it in person, you can see that the little figure he's dragging down has a money bag for a head, like an old-fashioned bank bag.
Yes. Though he had a comment about financial banks, that they ruined him or whatever. So he had to get back at them. So he made them like a lot of money bags. Yes.
Yeah, it looks like there's a lot of similar statues at the same station, and some of them people apparently so often stop to touch them, or as they're passing by reach out to touch them, maybe in the hopes of having some luck with money themselves, that parts of the statues have become extremely polished.
Yes.
Just because people keep grabbing them. I also found out that there is a project, or there was a project underway at least. There's a photo I found from January of 2019 that August Belmont's private car is being restored. And I'm going to drop a link to that into the chat so people can see if they want. It is looking absolutely gorgeous. The colors, the paint, the stained glass work. Just to imagine riding in a train car like this is beyond anything I can think of experiencing. And if there are any remaining questions or comments, just as a reminder that this presentation has been recorded. We're still recording right at the moment. If there's any part that anyone needs to have edited out of the final recording, please let us know by contacting the library, either by phone or by email. Our email address is irvref@wlsmail.org. That's IRVREF@WLSmail.org, as in Westchester Library System. And our phone number is area code 914-591-7840. We'll start taking calls at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning if anyone needs to give a call and speak to a live person, and I'll be in the building at that time if you need to talk to me. Oscar, it doesn't look like there are any remaining comments or questions, so I'll leave it to you. Do you have any final thoughts?
This was a fun project, and I had an exhibit at the Transit Museum way back at the Whitney Museum, and this is all an extension of that exhibit. Also, if anybody wants to get in touch with me, they can contact me through my website at israelowitzpublishing.com. Should I spell it?
Let's see. I'm seeing actually that when I search for the website, I see Jewish Heritage Tours
Yes.
New York.com.
Either one.
Okay.
Either one will get through.
So I'm going to drop that into the chat and leave that up for a moment so that people can see it. We have a comment from B. John. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being stellar, this rate's 100.
Whoa, thank you.
All right. So that is fantastic. Let's see. And just wait a moment to see if there are any more comments or questions. Thank you, Oscar, and everyone who's joined us tonight. We will try to get the recording of us up as soon as possible. If you know someone who missed out and wanted to see it, but it will take a little while in terms of processing and just editing out some errors and snafus. So we'll make sure to post an announcement on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as soon as that's up. If you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, it'll be made available there, and we'll also be posting it on our website. Just as a reminder, tomorrow at 2 o'clock, we're going to be having Healthy Living for Your Brain and Body offered by the Alzheimer's Association. If you're interested in signing up for that, please visit our website and look for our online calendar. There should be a link on there. You can always keep track on our online calendar to see any other upcoming presentations, workshops, webinars, and other programming. And that'll also be the best place to keep track of any sudden changes in schedule if we have to reschedule something or cancel something. Thanks to everyone who joined us tonight once again. Thank you, Oscar, for a wonderful presentation about a very interesting subject. And we hope to have you back again in the future for another presentation.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to end the meeting for everyone now. You all have a great evening.